My name is Helena Duarte. I was 42 years old, and I lived in Coimbra, Portugal. From the outside, my life looked perfectly normal, stable, predictable. But inside me, there was a quiet emptiness that followed me everywhere, an ache without a name. Every morning, I woke up at 6:30 a.m., the same alarm, the same routine. I made coffee, stood by the small kitchen window, and watched the city slowly come alive. Cars passing, people rushing, life moving forward, and I stayed still. I worked as a history teacher at a public high school, spending my days explaining the rise and fall of civilizations, ancient wars, lost empires, while silently wondering why my own soul felt so tired. My students asked deep questions about the past, about meaning, about why humanity keeps repeating the same mistakes. Sometimes, their questions felt like they were meant for me. I believed in God. I always had, but belief is not the same as connection. My prayers had become short, almost mechanical. Thank you for this day. Protect my family. Help me get through tomorrow. I spoke the words, but I didn't feel them anymore. After my divorce 3 years earlier, something inside me shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't bitterness. It was worse. It was distance. Distance from joy. Distance from hope. Distance from God. I didn't stop going to church, but I stopped expecting anything to happen there. I sat in the pews, listened to sermons, sang hymns, yet felt invisible, as if heaven was silent, and I was afraid to ask why. At night, when the apartment grew quiet, the emptiness grew louder. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, asking questions I was afraid to say out loud. Is this all there is? Did I miss something important? Why do I feel like time is running out? What disturbed me most was that the feeling wasn't sadness, it was urgency. An unshakable sense that something was approaching. Something big. Something unavoidable. In the weeks leading up to January, I began having strange moments. Sudden chills for no reason. A tightness in my chest when I prayed. Dreams that felt more real than waking life. Dreams filled with light, silence, and a voice I couldn't quite remember when I woke up. I ignored them. I told myself I was just tired, overworked, emotionally worn down. That's what adults do. We rationalize the things that scare us. But deep inside, I felt it clearly. My life was calm, but my spirit was not. And I had no idea that very soon everything I thought I knew about life, death, time, and truth was about to be shattered between January 9th and January 15th. In a way that would leave me forever changed. Silent prayers, unfinished cries, and the signs I ignored. The days leading up to January 9th felt ordinary on the surface, but underneath something was unraveling. I noticed it first in the silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the heavy kind. The kind that presses against your chest when you're alone. The kind that makes you feel watched, not by something threatening, but by something waiting. My prayers began to change. I still knelt by my bed at night, hands folded, eyes closed. But I often stopped mid-sentence. Words failed me. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I felt that whatever I said would be incomplete. It was as if my soul wanted to cry out something my mind couldn't translate. God, I would whisper, barely audible. And then, nothing. I would sit there in the dark, feeling foolish, almost embarrassed, before finally lying down and turning my face toward the wall. Sleep didn't come easily anymore. When it did, the dreams came. They weren't chaotic or frightening. That was the strange part. They were calm, too calm, filled with a brightness that didn't hurt my eyes and a sense of presence that felt familiar, as if I had known it long before this life. In one dream, I stood in a wide open space with no sky and no ground, just light. I couldn't see anyone, but I wasn't alone. I felt known, completely known. Every regret, every doubt, every hidden fear, exposed, yet met with compassion instead of judgment. I woke up with tears on my pillow. Another night, I heard my name spoken softly. Helena. I sat up in bed, heart racing, the room dark and silent. No one was there, yet the sound lingered in the air, vibrating in my chest long after my ears told me it was gone. I told no one, not my sister, not my colleagues, not even my priest. I was afraid of what it might mean, or worse, afraid it meant nothing at all. At work, I became distracted. I lost my train of thought mid-lesson. Dates and names I had taught for years slipped from my memory. My students noticed. "Are you okay, Miss Duarte?" one of them asked. I smiled. "Just tired." But it wasn't exhaustion, it was anticipation. Small things began happening, things I brushed off as coincidence. A stranger on the bus turned to me and said, "You look like someone who's about to start over." A radio sermon I'd never heard before spoke directly about urgency and obedience. A passage of scripture I randomly opened warned about ignoring the voice of God when it calls. Each time my chest tightened. Each time I closed the book, changed the station, looked away. I didn't want disruption. I didn't want revelation. I wanted comfort. Looking back now, I understand how merciful those warnings were. But at the time, I did what so many of us do. I delayed. I told myself, I'll pray seriously tomorrow. I'll reflect more this weekend. I'll ask God what He wants. Later. Later felt safer. What I didn't realize was that heaven was already moving, and time was far shorter than I believed. The night of January 8th was the heaviest of all. I couldn't sleep. The air in my apartment felt thick, almost electric. I sat on the edge of my bed at 2:17 a.m., staring at my hands, feeling an overwhelming sadness mixed with peace, a combination that made no sense. For the first time in years, I cried and prayed out loud. "I don't understand what you're doing," I said, my voice breaking. "But if you're trying to reach me, please don't stop." The moment the words left my mouth, a calm settled over me. Not relief, but certainty. Something was coming. The next morning, January 9th, dawned cold and clear. I remember thinking how beautiful the sky looked, unusually bright, as if washed clean. I lingered by the window longer than usual, coffee untouched in my hand. A strange thought crossed my mind, uninvited and sharp. Pay attention today. I shook my head, almost laughing at myself. And yet, I did. Every sound felt louder, every moment sharper. I hugged my sister a little longer when she called. I paused before leaving the apartment, my hand resting on the doorframe, as if memorizing the feel of it. I had no idea why, but heaven knew, and despite all the signs, all the whispers, all the unfinished prayers, I still didn't understand that I was standing at the edge of the moment that would divide my life into before and after. January 9th, the day. Everything slipped out of control. January 9th began like any other weekday, and that's what makes it so haunting to remember. There was no thunder in the sky, no warning sirens, no dramatic sense that this day would change everything. I left my apartment just after 7:40 a.m., wrapped in my coat, my bag slung over my shoulder, the cold air brushing my face. The city moved as it always did, buses stopping, people walking quickly, lives intersecting without ever truly touching. I remember thinking, it's strangely beautiful today. The sky was pale blue, almost spotless. The kind of sky you only notice when something inside you slows down. On the bus ride to school, I sat by the window, watching the streets pass by. My phone buzzed with notifications I didn't open. My thoughts drifted to nothing in particular, and yet to everything at once. There was a heaviness in my chest, but also calm. That should have scared me. At school, my morning classes went by in a blur. I taught, I spoke, I answered questions. But it felt as if part of me was already somewhere else, observing from a distance. During my lunch break, I stepped outside the building to get some air. The courtyard was quiet. I closed my eyes for just a moment and whispered, barely moving my lips, "God, I'm listening." I didn't hear a voice, but I felt something shift. The rest of the day passed uneventfully. No arguments, no sudden bad news, no dramatic moments that would later explain what happened next. That's the unsettling truth about life-changing moments. They often arrive disguised as normal. At 4:18 p.m., I left the school and began the short walk toward the bus stop. I remember checking the time, annoyed that I might miss the next bus. I stepped off the curb, my mind already calculating how long the wait would be. And then, everything fractured. There was a sudden sound, a jolt. Not pain, not at first, but confusion. A disorienting sense that the world had lost its structure. Sound stretched and warped. Time felt wrong. I remember thinking, This isn't real. This can't be happening. And then, stillness. The noise faded as if someone had turned down the volume of the world. The cold vanished. The pressure disappeared. I felt no fear, only surprise. I became aware of something impossible. I was no longer inside my body. At first, my mind rejected the idea. I tried to move my arms, and realized I didn't have arms the way I used to. I didn't have weight. I didn't have pain. I didn't even have breath. Yet I was more aware than I had ever been in my life. I perceived everything at once. I saw people gathering. I saw urgency in their movements. I heard voices calling for help, but the words didn't carry panic to me. They sounded distant, like echoes underwater. Then came the realization that stopped all thought. That's me. I saw my body lying there, still, fragile, strangely unfamiliar. There was no attachment, no horror, just recognition. I expected fear to flood me. It didn't. Instead, a profound calm wrapped around me, deeper than any peace I had ever known. It felt intelligent, intentional, as if this moment had been carefully prepared. I understood something without being told. I am not dying. I have died. And yet I was alive, not fading, not disappearing, not afraid. I felt whole. Time lost meaning. I couldn't tell how long I hovered there. Seconds or minutes, it didn't matter. What mattered was the clarity. Every memory of my life surfaced at once, not as images, but as understanding. I knew what mattered. I knew what didn't. Regrets appeared, but without shame. Mistakes, but without condemnation. There was no judgment, only truth. Then I sensed movement, not physical, but directional. A pull, gentle but undeniable, guiding me away from the scene below. As I drifted upward, the world I had known began to dissolve. Colors softened, sounds thinned. The city became distant, like a place I had once visited but no longer belonged to. And for the first time, a thought formed that carried both awe and hesitation. I'm not meant to stay here. Ahead of me, something awaited. Not darkness, not emptiness, but presence. A presence so vast and loving that it drew me forward without effort. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was not alone, and that what came next would redefine everything I thought I understood about life, death, and the days yet to come. The body stayed behind, but I was still alive. The moment I was drawn away from my body, something extraordinary became clear. I was more alive than I had ever been. There was no confusion anymore, no fog, no emotional weight dragging me down. Every thought was sharp, complete, and calm, as if my mind had finally been freed from a constant noise I didn't even realize existed while I was alive. I didn't feel panic. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel the urge to go back. Instead, I felt expanded. It's difficult to explain without human words limiting the experience, but I'll try. Imagine suddenly understanding yourself fully. Not just your actions, but your intentions. Not just your memories, but the reasons behind them. Every choice, every fear, every silent prayer I had ever whispered made sense all at once. I knew who I was. Not the version defined by my job, my marriage, my disappointments, but the core of me. The part that existed before expectations, before pain, before time. Below me, the scene of the world continued, but it no longer held authority over me. I could see movement and urgency, but none of it reached my heart. It was like watching a storm from a place where the rain couldn't touch you. I realized something profound. Pain belongs to the body. Fear belongs to the mind. But the soul belongs somewhere else. As I drifted higher, I became aware that I wasn't floating randomly. There was direction, purpose, guidance, not imposed, but invited. I followed without resistance. The space around me didn't look like anything I had seen on Earth. There were no walls, no sky, no horizon. Yet there was depth, distance without measurement, motion without effort. Colors existed, but they weren't static. They moved like emotion, like meaning. Light didn't come from a single source. It seemed to exist everywhere at once, soft and intelligent. And then I noticed something else. I was not alone. I didn't see figures at first. I felt them. Presences. Distinct, aware, peaceful. They didn't speak, but they communicated clearly, through understanding, not language. There was no interrogation, no accusation, no review filled with shame. Instead, there was recognition. You belong here. You are known. You are safe. Those truths entered me instantly, without sound. As I moved further away from the physical world, I felt layers being released, emotional burdens I had carried for years without realizing how heavy they were. The disappointment of my divorce dissolved. The quiet resentment I had hidden disappeared. The fear of not being enough vanished completely. Not because they were excused, but because they were understood. I saw my life not as a list of failures or successes, but as a journey of learning. Even my mistakes appeared differently, as moments of growth, not condemnation. There was no shame in this place, only truth wrapped in love. Time did not pass the way it does on Earth. There was no before or after. Everything existed in a continuous now. I understood why people say eternity isn't endless time. It's the absence of time. And in that timeless awareness, a realization came that shook me more than the accident itself. This world is not the end, and it is not the most real thing we experience. Earth felt distant now, not in space, but in importance, like a classroom you eventually graduate from, necessary, meaningful, but temporary. As I continued forward, the light around me intensified, not brighter in a painful way, but richer, deeper. It carried emotion, intention. Love so complete it felt like recognition rather than affection. I understood something without being told. This light knew me before I knew myself. My awareness sharpened further, as if preparing me for something, or someone. And for the first time since leaving my body, a question formed in my mind. Why am I being shown this? The answer didn't come immediately. Instead, the light ahead began to gather, to focus, not into a shape at first, but into presence. A presence so powerful and gentle at the same time that I felt myself respond instinctively, like a child recognizing a familiar voice. I didn't see a face yet. I didn't hear a word yet. But I knew, with absolute certainty. I was about to encounter the one my soul had been reaching for in every incomplete prayer, even when my lips didn't know how to ask. And everything in me understood that what was about to happen would not just explain my life. It would redefine the future. Drifting between two worlds. I don't know exactly when I crossed the boundary. There was no doorway, no sudden shift, no dramatic line separating one place from another. It felt more like drifting out of a dense fog into open air, gradual, gentle, undeniable. The further I moved from the world I had known, the more I realized how limited my senses had been while alive. Here, awareness was not confined to sight or sound. I knew things instantly. Understanding arrived whole, without effort, without doubt. There was no guessing, no second guessing, no inner argument. For the first time, my thoughts were perfectly aligned with truth. I became aware that I was between two realities, no longer bound to earth, but not yet fully immersed in what lay ahead. It felt intentional, as if this space existed specifically for transition. Behind me, I could still sense the physical world, faint, muted, like a memory that no longer carried emotional weight. Ahead of me, something vast and alive was waiting. And then I noticed how peaceful I was. This peace wasn't the absence of noise or pain. It was fullness, completion. Like finally resting after a lifetime of tension you didn't realize you were holding. On Earth, peace always felt fragile, temporary, conditional. Here, it was unshakable. I didn't miss my body. I didn't miss time. I didn't miss control. What surprised me most was that I didn't feel detached from love. I felt immersed in it. Every relationship I had ever had suddenly made sense. I understood where I had loved well and where fear had limited me. Not with regret, but with clarity. I saw how often I had been guided without realizing it. Delays that saved me. Closed doors that protected me. Painful endings that redirected my path. None of it had been random. As I drifted, presences became clearer around me. They did not approach aggressively or demand attention. They simply were, distinct, aware, calm. I sensed that they recognized me, not as a stranger, but as someone familiar. There was no hierarchy in the way humans understand it, no sense of superiority or inferiority, only harmony, like different notes forming a single, perfect chord. Without words, they communicated something important. You are safe. You are being guided. What comes next matters. I felt no fear hearing this, only readiness. Then something extraordinary happened. I became aware of Earth again, but not as a place, as a condition. I saw how heavy it is to live in a body, how loud the world is, how much effort it takes just to exist within time, pain, and uncertainty. And suddenly I felt compassion, deep compassion, for everyone still living there. For the anxious, for the angry, for the distracted, for the hopeless. I understood how easy it is to forget who we are when survival becomes the priority. That's when I realized something shocking. Most people are not lost because they are evil. They are lost because they are tired. This understanding didn't come as a thought. It arrived as truth, settling deep within me. As I continued drifting, the light ahead intensified. It no longer surrounded me only. It seemed to respond to me, not because of anything I had done, but because I was becoming more aware. The closer I moved, the more the light revealed layers within itself. Wisdom, authority, gentleness, joy. It wasn't passive. It was alive. I felt drawn to it, not by force, but by recognition, like returning to a place I had always belonged to but forgotten. And then, for the first time since leaving my body, emotion overwhelmed me. Not fear, not sadness, longing. A longing so deep it felt ancient, as if my soul had been waiting through an entire lifetime for this moment. I wanted to move faster, but there was no faster here. Everything unfolded in perfect timing. As I approached, the presences around me receded slightly, not leaving, but making space. This moment was personal, intimate, sacred. I sensed that I was about to encounter the source of the love I was feeling. Not an abstract force, but a being with will, intention, and awareness. Someone who knew my name. My awareness sharpened again, as if preparing me. Not with instructions, but with strength. And then, without warning, I understood something that sent a ripple through my entire being. I was not here by accident. This experience was not only for me. What I was about to see, what I was about to hear, carried consequences far beyond my own life. It was meant to be remembered. It was meant to be shared. And it was meant for a time that was drawing very near. As the light gathered before me, focusing into presence, one clear realization formed in my mind. Between January 9th and January 15th, humanity stood closer to a crossroads than anyone on Earth truly understood. And I was about to be shown why. The light that did not hurt my eyes. The light did not arrive suddenly. It unfolded. At first, it felt like warmth, not on skin, but within awareness. A gentle expansion, as if something inside me was opening after being closed for a very long time. The closer I moved, the more I realized this light wasn't merely surrounding me, it was welcoming me. On Earth, light always comes from somewhere. A lamp, the sun, a flame. Here, light simply was. It had no edge, no shadow, no source I could point to. And yet it was unmistakably present. Intelligent, intentional, alive. What surprised me most was that it didn't overwhelm my senses. It didn't blind me. It didn't force awe through intensity. It didn't demand attention. Instead, it felt perfectly calibrated, as if it knew exactly how much I could receive. The closer I came, the deeper the peace became. This peace was unlike anything I had ever known. It wasn't relief from suffering. It wasn't the calm after chaos. It wasn't the comfort of safety. It was belonging. Every trace of loneliness dissolved. Not faded, dissolved. As if it had never truly been part of me. Only a condition of the world I had left behind. I understood something with sudden clarity. Loneliness is not our natural state. It is a symptom of separation. Here, separation did not exist. The light carried emotion, but not the unstable emotions humans experience. This emotion was constant, unwavering. Love without anxiety, joy without fear of loss, authority without dominance. It felt ancient and immediate at the same time. I became aware that the light knew me completely, not the version of me others saw, not the version I presented, but the version hidden beneath survival, habit, and fear. Every thought I had ever hidden, every question I had been afraid to ask, every moment I had doubted my worth, none of it shocked the light, none of it repelled it. Instead, I felt something I had never felt in my entire life. I was fully known and fully accepted. I didn't need to explain myself. I didn't need to defend my past. I didn't need to promise to be better. The light didn't love me because of who I was. It loved me because I was. Tears came, not physical tears, but something deeper. A release so profound it felt like remembering something I had forgotten before I was born. I realized then how exhausted humanity is, how heavy it is to constantly measure yourself, to wonder if you are enough, to fear rejection, failure, and insignificance. None of that existed here. The light communicated without words. Truth flowed directly into understanding, bypassing language entirely. And one truth settled into me with great weight. This world is held together by love, not force. And humanity has forgotten this. As I moved deeper into the light, memories surfaced, not as images, but as insight. Moments in my life where I had chosen fear instead of trust, control instead of surrender, silence instead of truth. But there was no accusation attached to these memories, only invitation. You were learning. You were growing. You were never abandoned. The light did not erase responsibility, but it removed condemnation. That distinction changed everything. Suddenly I understood why so many people fear encountering God. They expect exposure without compassion, judgment without understanding. But this light did not strip me bare to shame me. It revealed me to heal me. Then something shifted. The peace remained, but a new sensation joined it. Presence, focus, intention narrowing, like a vast awareness choosing to meet me personally. The light gathered, not into a harsh brightness, but into clarity. And I sensed that I was no longer simply within the light. I was before someone. The atmosphere changed, not heavier, but more profound. Like the moment before a truth is spoken that will alter everything. I felt small, not insignificant, but humbled. Aware that I was standing before something infinitely greater than myself, and yet, inexplicably, not afraid. I wanted to speak, but words felt unnecessary. Everything I could possibly say was already known. And then, without sound, without movement, without form as humans understand it, I felt it clearly. I was seen, not glanced at, not observed, seen, as one sees something precious, as one sees something intentionally created. The light pulsed gently, and with it came understanding that caused my awareness to tremble. This presence was not distant, not abstract, not indifferent. It was relational, personal, and it had been with me long before this moment, through every unanswered prayer, every quiet doubt, every season where I thought heaven was silent. Heaven had never been silent. I just hadn't known how to listen. And now, standing within this light that did not hurt my eyes, my awareness prepared for the moment my soul somehow knew was inevitable. A moment where the presence would no longer be felt only as light and truth, but would speak. And when it did, nothing I believed about time, history, and what was coming next would remain the same. When he spoke my name, the moment did not begin with sound. It began with recognition. Before a single word was spoken, I knew, in a way deeper than thought, deeper than belief, that I was not standing before an idea, a force, or a symbol. I was before him. The presence within the light became unmistakably personal, not distant, not abstract, focused, intentional, aware of me in a way no human ever could be. And then, without lips moving, without air vibrating, without sound traveling, he spoke my name. Helena. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it carried more authority than any voice I had ever heard. When he spoke my name, something inside me responded instantly, like a memory waking up after a long sleep. My awareness bent toward him naturally, without fear, without resistance. I felt seen in a way that stripped away every false version of myself. Not exposed, understood. The voice did not come from one direction. It surrounded me, passed through me, resonated within me. It was gentle and unyielding at the same time, tender without weakness, powerful without threat. I did not need to ask who he was. My soul already knew. Every prayer I had ever whispered, every doubt I had buried, every moment I had felt abandoned, all of it suddenly made sense in his presence. I tried to respond, not with words but with emotion, gratitude, awe, relief, longing. Everything poured out at once, and he understood it all. "You have been searching," he said, not as an accusation, but as a statement of fact. "And you were never wrong to search." That single sentence shattered something inside me. All my life, I had been afraid that my questions disappointed God, that my doubts pushed him away, that my silence meant failure. But here, in his presence, I understood something revolutionary. Honest searching does not offend heaven. Indifference does. He showed me moments from my life, not as images replayed on a screen, but as insights. Times when I had felt lost, moments when I had prayed and felt nothing, seasons when I believed God was distant. "I was near," he said simply, "even when you could not feel me." There was no defensiveness in his voice, no need to prove anything, only truth. Then his presence deepened, and I felt the weight of what was about to be shared. "What you are experiencing now," he said, "is not only for you." The light around us seemed to expand, revealing layers beyond what I had previously perceived, like curtains being drawn back. I sensed urgency, not panic, but importance. Time, as I understood it on Earth, felt suddenly fragile. "There is a narrowing window," he continued, "a period where decisions carry greater consequence." Without warning, understanding flooded me. Dates, not as numbers written on a calendar, but as a season, a convergence. "Between January 9 and January 15th, he said, "many paths intersect." I did not see disasters in the way people imagine, no spectacle meant to frighten. Instead, I saw choices, countless choices, personal, collective, quiet and public, decisions made in homes, in governments, in hearts. I saw how distraction dulls discernment, how noise replaces wisdom, how fear masquerades as logic. "Many will feel unrest without knowing why," he said. "They will sense something shifting, but will seek comfort instead of truth." I felt a deep sorrow in his presence, not despair, but grief born of love. "They are not being punished," he said. "They are being warned." That sentence stayed with me. Warned, not threatened. He showed me how often humanity mistakes mercy for delay, how silence is interpreted as absence, how patience is misunderstood as approval. "Time is being given," he said, "not taken." I felt overwhelmed, not by fear, but by responsibility. "Why show me this?" I asked, not aloud, but with my awareness. His response was immediate. "Because you will speak," he said, "and because many will only listen to someone who has seen." I felt unworthy instantly. I am ordinary, I thought. I am not strong enough, not brave enough. His presence did not shift, but something like reassurance flowed through me. "I do not choose the impressive," he said. "I choose the willing." That truth struck me harder than any rebuke ever could. He showed me what happens when people ignore the quiet warnings, not as punishment, but as consequence. Confusion deepening, division growing, hearts hardening not out of cruelty, but exhaustion. And yet, threaded through everything I saw, was hope. Always hope. "There is still time," he said, "but not for delay." I felt the weight of his words settle into me, not crushing, but anchoring. "This message will be doubted," he said gently. "Some will mock, some will dismiss, some will distort it." I felt fear rise in me for the first time. "And yet," he continued, "it must still be spoken." Then, his presence softened even further, and I felt something unmistakable. Love. Not conditional, not cautious, not withdrawn. Love that sends warnings because it refuses to abandon. "You will return," he said. "And when you do, you will remember." I wanted to stay. The thought formed instinctively, not from fear of life, but from fullness. "I don't want to leave," I felt. For the first time, His voice carried something like tenderness mixed with firmness. "It is not your time," he said, "but it is your assignment." The light around us began to shift again, not fading, but preparing, and I understood that this encounter, this sacred moment, was ending. But what he had placed within me was not. It was only beginning. What will happen between January 9th and January 15th? When he spoke of the days between January 9th and January 15th, it was not as a prediction meant to impress. It was a warning meant to awaken. I expected visions of destruction, scenes of chaos, images that would shock and terrify. That is not what he showed me. Instead, he showed me something far more unsettling. A world standing at a crossroads, without realizing it. The light around us shifted again, and understanding opened like a veil being pulled back. I did not see dates written in fire. I sensed convergence, multiple threads of cause and consequence tightening at once. "These days," he said, "will feel ordinary to many." That surprised me. People will go to work, children will go to school, plans will be made, celebrations will continue. Nothing dramatic on the surface. But beneath it, he continued, decisions will be sealed. I felt the weight of that word, sealed. He showed me how choices made quietly often carry more power than those made publicly. How inner alignment determines outer outcome. How moments of apparent normalcy can be the most decisive. Between these days, he said, many will choose comfort over truth. I saw it then, not as judgment, but as pattern. People ignoring inner unrest. Nations prioritizing image over integrity. Leaders choosing control instead of humility. Individuals numbing conviction with distraction. It wasn't evil in the way people imagine. It was avoidance. The danger, he said, is not sudden collapse. It is gradual dulling. I felt sorrow move through his presence again, grief without anger. He showed me how warnings are often mistaken for negativity, how discernment is dismissed as fear, how calling people to awareness is labeled as extremism. Many will say, nothing happened before, nothing will happen now, he said, and they will confuse delay with safety. I understood then why these days mattered. They were not about catastrophe, they were about direction, a turning point, not forced, but chosen. I saw how small decisions layered upon each other, building momentum, words spoken, truths ignored, lines crossed quietly, convictions softened for the sake of peace. Every era, he said, has moments when trajectories shift. These days were one of them. I felt compelled to ask something that weighed heavily on me. Is this punishment? I wondered. His response was immediate, firm, yet gentle. No, he said, it is consequence. That distinction settled deeply within me. Punishment is imposed, consequence is revealed. He showed me how systems built without truth eventually strain under their own weight, how lies require constant maintenance, how ignoring moral foundations doesn't make them disappear, it only weakens what stands upon them. The shaking many will feel, he said, is not destruction, it is exposure. Exposure of motives, exposure of intentions, exposure of what has been hidden beneath noise and distraction. And then, unexpectedly, he showed me hope again, not as an abstract idea, but as opportunity. In these same days, he said, many will awaken. I saw individuals pause, truly pause, and listen to the unrest within them. I saw people choosing humility over pride, repentance over justification, courage over convenience, small choices, quiet moments, but powerful. One sincere turning, he said, outweighs many years of delay. That truth radiated through me. I understood that these days were not a deadline, they were an invitation. A narrowing window does not mean the door is closing, it means clarity is increasing. Those who seek me, he said, will find me. Not because they deserve it, not because they are perfect, but because they are willing. He showed me how fear will increase for those who cling to control, and how peace will deepen for those who release it. People will ask, why do I feel unsettled? He said, and many answers will be offered to them. Distraction, entertainment, false assurances. But few will tell them the truth, he continued, that the unrest is a signal, not a threat. A call to reorient, to remember, to return. I felt urgency rise again, not frantic, but focused. "What should I tell them?" I asked. His response was simple. "Tell them to listen," he said. "Tell them not to harden their hearts. Tell them that stillness will reveal more than noise ever could." He showed me that the greatest danger of these days was not what might happen externally, but what could be lost internally. Discernment, compassion, truth. Those who remain awake, he said, will carry light for others. Not loudly, not forcefully, but faithfully. As his words settled within me, I understood that this message would frustrate those seeking spectacle, because it demanded responsibility. No one could outsource this moment. No one could hide behind ignorance. These days would not force change, but they would reveal readiness. The light around us began to soften again, and I sensed that this part of the revelation was complete. But something else remained, something heavier, a truth about resistance, about denial, about what happens when warnings are repeatedly ignored. And I knew, before he said anything more, that the next part would be the hardest to share. What they don't want you to know. When the next understanding unfolded, it didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It came like a quiet unveiling. I sensed a resistance, not in the presence before me, but in the world I had left behind. A pressure, a reluctance. As if something deeply embedded in human systems strained against the very truths being revealed. "What they don't want you to know," he said, "is rarely hidden by force." That surprised me. I had imagined secrets guarded by power, locked away by elites, protected by fear. But what he showed me was far more subtle and far more effective. Most truth, he continued, is buried under noise. I saw it clearly then. Not censorship, saturation, not silence, distraction, not chains, comfort. He showed me how truth doesn't need to be attacked when it can be drowned. How urgency is neutralized by entertainment. How discernment weakens when everything feels equally important. The enemy of awareness, he said, is not information. It is excess. I understood instantly. People are not kept in darkness because they lack access to truth. They are overwhelmed until truth feels exhausting. I saw endless streams of opinions, outrage cycles, constant stimulation, all demanding attention, none inviting reflection. Stillness has become threatening, he said, because stillness reveals. In silence, people begin to ask questions they can't distract themselves from. In quiet, conscience speaks. In reflection, alignment is demanded. So noise is preferred. I saw how discomfort is quickly labeled as anxiety instead of invitation. How inner conviction is medicated, numbed, or rationalized away. Many have been taught, he said, to fear their own conscience. That sentence pierced me. I saw how often people sense something is wrong, not just globally, but internally, and immediately look outward for explanations. Politics, economics, other people, rarely inward. What they don't want you to know, he continued, is that the greatest shifts begin privately. Not in headlines, not in protests, not in institutions, but in hearts. I saw how systems depend on disengaged individuals. How structures built on compromise require people to stop asking why. Awakened individuals are difficult to control, he said, because they respond to truth, not pressure. That clarity unsettled me, not because it felt conspiratorial, but because it felt obvious. I saw how moral clarity is often mocked as naivete, how conviction is framed as intolerance, how humility is mistaken for weakness. Truth has been rebranded as aggression, he said, and confusion has been marketed as freedom. That hurt to see. I understood then why so many people feel disoriented, why nothing feels solid anymore. When everything is questioned, nothing feels anchorable. I saw how language itself has been softened, not to heal, but to avoid responsibility. Words like repentance, accountability, obedience, and truth are made uncomfortable, outdated, or extreme. Yet without them, growth stalls. What they don't want you to know, he said gently, is that comfort has replaced wisdom. Not because comfort is evil, but because it becomes dangerous when it is prioritized above truth. I saw how warnings are dismissed because they interrupt routines, how urgency is rejected because it demands change. People prefer reassurance, he said, even when reassurance is dishonest. That sentence lingered. I felt a deep compassion then, not frustration. I saw how tired people are, how worn down by constant crisis and contradiction, how desperate they are for relief, any relief, and how easily false peace fills that need. False peace asks nothing of you, he said. True peace transforms you. I saw how transformation is resisted, not because people are evil, but because change costs something. Time, pride, control. What they don't want you to know, he said, is that awakening begins with surrender. Not surrender to fear, but surrender of illusion. The illusion that we can avoid consequence. That truth is negotiable. That meaning can be customized without cost. I understood then why this message would be uncomfortable. It doesn't accuse institutions. It confronts individuals. It doesn't offer enemies. It demands introspection. And that is far harder. I felt concern rise within me. Will they listen? I wondered. His response was calm. Some will, he said. Most will not. Not because they cannot, but because they choose not to. Awareness requires humility, he said. And humility is rare when identity is fragile. I saw how easily people confuse their opinions with their worth. How questioning beliefs feels like personal attack. How pride quietly blocks growth. Yet again, hope emerged. I saw small groups, individuals, quiet listeners, those who would feel something stir as they heard this message. Not fear, but recognition. They will not need convincing, he said. They will remember. That word again, remember. As if truth is not something new to be learned, but something ancient to be recalled. I felt the weight of responsibility press deeper into me. This is why it must be spoken, he said, not to persuade, but to awaken. The resistance I sensed earlier became clearer. Not everyone opposes truth loudly. Many resist it softly, by postponing. I'll think about it later. Now isn't the time. Things will sort themselves out. Delay dressed as wisdom. What they don't want you to know, he said quietly, is that delay shapes destiny. Not dramatically, not instantly, but cumulatively. The light around us shifted again, signaling that this layer of understanding was complete. I felt heavy, not hopeless, but sober. Because now I understood. The greatest barrier to this message would not be disbelief. It would be comfortable indifference. And I knew the next part, the choice, would confront that indifference directly. The choice, to stay or to return. The understanding that followed did not come as a command. It came as a question, not spoken aloud, but felt with unmistakable clarity. I sensed a stillness settle around us, deeper than before. The light remained constant, the peace unwavering, but something had shifted. The urgency softened into intimacy. The vastness narrowed into a moment that was profoundly personal. And then I knew. A choice was being placed before me. I did not see two doors. I did not hear options listed, but I understood the reality instantly. I could remain, or I could return. The realization stirred something deep within me, not fear, but longing. Here, there was no pain, no confusion, no doubt. Everything made sense. Everything fit. The peace I felt was not temporary or fragile. It was complete. Staying would not be escape. It would be rest. I felt the pull of it. Gentle, inviting, final. And then, just as clearly, I felt the weight of what returning would mean. The body, the noise, the disbelief, the loneliness of carrying something others might not understand. I hesitated, not out of rebellion, but honesty. I want to stay, I felt. The admission surprised me with its intensity. It wasn't said out of fear of life, but out of recognition. This place felt like home in a way Earth never had. His presence did not withdraw at my confession. There was no disappointment, no correction, only understanding. Many feel that way when they remember, he said gently. Remember. That word again, as if this piece was not new, but familiar. Then without pressure, he showed me what staying would mean. Not images, knowing. Completion, rest, release from time. And then he showed me what returning would mean. I saw myself waking up, confused, heavy, disoriented. I felt the shock of being back inside a body that felt restrictive after such freedom. I felt the ache of trying to explain the unexplainable. I saw people listening, some curious, some skeptical, some immediately dismissive. I felt the sting of being misunderstood, labeled, reduced. I felt moments of doubt, not about what I had experienced, but about myself. Did I imagine it? Was I mistaken? Will anyone believe me? I felt the temptation to remain silent, to keep it private, to protect myself. Returning would not be easy. And yet, beneath the difficulty, I felt something else. Purpose, not grandiosity, not importance, responsibility. You would not return empty, he said. You would carry what you have seen. I understood then that returning was not about delivering information. It was about carrying awareness, a different way of seeing, a different way of listening, a different way of living. I felt torn, not between good and bad, but between rest and obedience. And then he showed me something unexpected. I saw moments in the future where my words would reach someone at the exact moment they needed to hear them. Not crowds, individuals. A woman sitting alone at night, feeling unseen. A man wrestling with doubt he never voiced. A young person sensing unrest they couldn't name. Not everyone would listen, but some would. And for them, this message would not be entertainment, it would be confirmation. You will not convince, he said. You will confirm. That shifted everything. I realized then that this mission was not about persuading the unwilling, but about reaching the receptive. The weight in my awareness changed shape. It no longer felt heavy. It felt anchored. Still, I hesitated. What if I fail? I wondered. His response was immediate. You are not asked to succeed, he said. You are asked to be faithful. That distinction dissolved my fear. Success depends on outcome. Faithfulness depends on obedience. Then came the clearest understanding of all. If you stay, he said, it will be peace for you. If you return, he continued, it will be light for others. I understood that neither choice was punishment, but only one carried assignment. I felt the finality of the moment approaching. The stillness deepened further, as if waiting. Not impatiently, but attentively. I knew the decision had to be mine. I thought of my sister, my students, the countless people I would never meet, but who might hear these words. I thought of how tired the world felt, how loud, how confused. And I understood something quietly profound. Peace received but not shared eventually becomes self-protection. And that was not what I had been shown all of this for. I will return, I felt. The moment the choice settled within me, the light responded, not with celebration, but with affirmation. You will not be alone, he said, and you will remember what matters. I felt something placed within me, not physically, but deeply, like a seed of clarity planted beyond doubt. This will not leave you, he said, even when the world tries to convince you it was nothing. The peace remained, but it began to transform into something else. Readiness. I sensed movement again, a gentle pull backward, away from the fullness and toward the weight of time. I felt a quiet grief, not regret, but farewell. And yet beneath it, certainty. Because now I understood, returning was not leaving him. It was carrying him into a world that desperately needed to remember. Returning to the body, and the pain of being alive again. The return did not happen all at once. It began with resistance. Not resistance from the light, but from me. As the pull backward strengthened, the peace I had been immersed in did not disappear, but it began to feel distant, like warmth receding as you step away from a fire. I sensed movement in reverse, not falling, not being pushed, but re-entering. Time began to reassert itself. That was the first shock. After existing in a place where time did not press or demand, its return felt heavy, linear, confining. I felt moments stacking again, before and after, now and then, and with them came weight. Then came sensation. At first it was dull, like pressure without pain, awareness compressing, expansion collapsing inward, and suddenly, I knew, I was back inside my body. The contrast was overwhelming. What had felt limitless now felt narrow. What had been light now felt dense. My thoughts, once clear and immediate, now moved slower, filtered through something thick and unresponsive. Breath returned, harsh and involuntary. I gasped, not from panic, but from shock. Air burned as it rushed into lungs that felt unfamiliar, almost hostile. Sound crashed in next. Voices, urgency, movement. Too loud, too fast, too much. I wanted to retreat, not into unconsciousness, but back into the stillness I had just left. But I couldn't. I was here. The peace did not leave me, but it no longer shielded me from sensation. Instead, it became something internal. Quiet, like an anchor beneath the surface of confusion. I tried to open my eyes. Light, harsh and fragmented, pierced through. Not the living light I had known, but artificial, glaring, unkind. My body reacted before my mind could understand. I felt fragile, not emotionally, physically. Every sensation felt amplified. The weight of my limbs, the pressure of being touched, the effort required to exist inside a body again. I heard someone say my name. This time it came through air. Helena, can you hear me? The sound felt distant, like it had to travel a long way to reach me. I wanted to answer, not with explanations, not with revelation, just to say yes. But my mouth would not cooperate. My body felt like something I had borrowed long ago and was only now being forced to reclaim. Moments blurred. I drifted in and out of awareness, caught between two realities, neither fully claiming me. And in those drifting moments, something unexpected happened. I grieved, not for my life, not for fear of death, but for the loss of that peace. The grief surprised me with its intensity. It felt like being separated from home after finally remembering where home was. Tears came, not dramatic, not loud, just steady, silent. They slid down my face without effort or resistance. Someone wiped them away, misunderstanding their cause. They thought I was afraid. I wasn't. I was mourning. When my awareness stabilized enough to understand where I was, confusion followed quickly. Hospital walls, muted colors, machines humming softly. I remembered choosing to return, but the why felt distant, buried beneath sensation. For a brief, terrifying moment, doubt surfaced. What if it was only a dream? What if it fades? What if I forget? That fear pierced deeper than any physical discomfort. And then, quietly, firmly, I felt it. The same presence, not surrounding me now, but within. The peace stirred, not as fullness, but as certainty. I would remember. The days that followed were not easy. Physically, my body needed time. Simple movements exhausted me. Noise overwhelmed me. I struggled to focus for more than short moments. But the greater struggle was internal. I saw the world differently now. And that difference created distance. Conversations felt shallow. Concerns felt misplaced. Urgency felt misdirected. I listened to people complain about trivial things, and something inside me ached, not in judgment, but sadness. They had no idea how fragile time was, how thin the veil truly is, how close truth always stands. I wanted to speak, but I didn't know how. How do you describe something that exists beyond language? How do you explain peace to a world addicted to noise? How do you warn without sounding extreme? Fear crept in again, quieter this time. What if they think I'm unstable? What if I lose credibility? What if speaking costs me everything? I remembered his words. You are not asked to succeed, you are asked to be faithful. That memory steadied me. I realized then that returning wasn't the end of the experience. It was the beginning of the hardest part. Living with knowledge others don't share, holding urgency without panic, carrying peace into a world that doesn't recognize it. The pain of being alive again wasn't just physical, it was the pain of contrast. But beneath it, unwavering, was purpose. And slowly, as strength returned to my body, clarity returned to my mind. I understood that the message I carried was not meant to be delivered from perfection, but from obedience. I didn't need eloquence, I needed courage. And as I lay there, staring at the ceiling one quiet night, the weight of the assignment settled fully into me. I had returned. Now I had to speak. The mission, speaking even when they doubt you. When I finally left the hospital, the world looked the same, but I wasn't. Cars still rushed through intersections, people still scrolled through their phones, conversations still revolved around deadlines, money, and plans for the weekend. Nothing outside had changed. Everything inside had. At first, I told myself I would take time, that I would recover fully before speaking, that I needed clarity, strength, the right words. But the truth was simpler and harder. I was afraid, not of what I had experienced, but of how others would respond to it. The first time I tried to speak about it, I chose someone safe, my sister. We sat at her kitchen table, mugs of tea between us, the late afternoon light slanting through the window. I started carefully. Too carefully. "I need to tell you something," I said. "Something that happened when I wasn't here." She listened. She nodded. She didn't interrupt. As I spoke, I watched her face change, curiosity softening into concern. Not disbelief exactly, but caution. When I finished, there was a long pause. She reached for my hand. "I'm just glad you're okay," she said gently. And then, after another pause, "Maybe it was your mind coping with everything." I nodded. I didn't argue, but something inside me tightened. That was the moment I realized something painful. People don't reject truth because they hate it. They reject it because it threatens their sense of normal. After that, I tried again. With friends, with colleagues. Each time, the reaction was similar. Polite interest, quiet skepticism. A quick shift back to safer topics. Some smiled uncomfortably. Some changed the subject. Some avoided me altogether. No one was cruel. But almost no one listened. And that hurt more than mockery would have. At night, doubt crept in. What if I misunderstood? What if I'm exaggerating? What if staying silent would be easier and safer? I remembered his words. This message will be doubted. Living inside that reality was harder than hearing it. I began to understand the cost of obedience. It's not always dramatic persecution. Often, it's quiet isolation. You're still invited to gatherings, but not asked what you think. Still welcomed, but not taken seriously. Still loved, but gently dismissed. I felt temptation rise, not to deny what I had seen, but to soften it, to make it more acceptable, less urgent, less uncomfortable. I could frame it as metaphor, as personal interpretation, as something symbolic rather than real. But every time I tried to do that, something inside me resisted. The peace I carried did not condemn me, but it did not allow compromise. One evening, overwhelmed and exhausted, I finally spoke honestly in prayer. "I don't know how to do this," I said. "I don't know how to speak without being dismissed." There was no audible response, but clarity settled. You are not responsible for how they receive it. You are responsible for whether you speak it. That changed everything. I realized I had been measuring success by reaction, agreement, validation, understanding. But that was never the assignment. The assignment was faithfulness. Slowly, I began to speak differently, not louder, not more forcefully, but more truthfully. I stopped trying to convince, stopped defending, stopped arguing. I spoke simply, when invited, when prompted, when the moment felt right. And something unexpected happened. Most people still didn't listen, but a few did. A colleague lingered after a conversation and whispered, "I've been feeling that unrest too." A stranger sent a message late at night. "I don't know why, but what you said stayed with me." A former student wrote, "I thought I was alone in feeling this way." They weren't many, but they were enough. I began to understand how the message actually works. It doesn't break down doors. It resonates. It doesn't chase the distracted. It reaches the ready. And readiness has nothing to do with intelligence, background, or belief. It has everything to do with humility. Still, fear didn't disappear. Some days I wanted to stop, to live quietly, to be normal again. But every time I considered withdrawing, I remembered the world as I had seen it. Tired, distracted, standing at a crossroads without realizing it. Silence began to feel heavier than speaking. I also began to understand why this message had been given to someone ordinary. If I had been extraordinary, people would focus on me. But being ordinary meant the focus stayed where it belonged, on the truth itself. I wasn't a prophet. I wasn't a leader. I wasn't special. I was a witness. And witnesses don't control outcomes. They testify. As January approached again in my thoughts, urgency sharpened. Not frantic, but focused. I felt it in conversations, in quiet moments, in prayer. Time felt thinner. I didn't set dates. I didn't make predictions. I simply reminded people to listen, to pause, to examine what they had been avoiding. Some laughed it off. Some leaned in. That was never up to me. What mattered was this. I no longer belonged to silence. And even when my voice trembled, even when doubt whispered, even when loneliness pressed in, I spoke. Because obedience had become less frightening than regret. And because somewhere, someone needed to hear these words at the exact moment their heart was ready. If you are hearing this now, it is not by accident. I don't say that lightly. I don't say it to sound mysterious, and I don't say it to frighten you. I say it because I have learned something that cannot be unlearned. Moments of awareness arrive quietly, and they do not wait forever. You may be watching this out of curiosity. You may be skeptical. You may even feel uncomfortable, unsure why this story has held your attention until now. That matters less than you think. What matters is what stirred inside you while listening. Because before any change happens externally, something always shifts internally first. A pause, a question, a sense of unrest you can't quite name. That unrest is not your enemy. It is an invitation. Between January 9 and January 15th, the world will not suddenly stop. There will be no announcement, no universal sign that forces belief. Life will continue. But beneath the surface, alignment will matter more than ever. Not perfection, not religion, not appearances. Alignment. What are you listening to? What are you avoiding? What truth have you been postponing because it feels inconvenient, uncomfortable, or demanding? You don't need to understand everything. You don't need to agree with everything. But you do need to be honest. Honest about the exhaustion you feel. Honest about the noise you hide behind. Honest about the quiet moments when you sense that something is off, not just in the world, but within you. That sense is not weakness. It is discernment awakening. Many people wait for certainty before they act. But clarity often comes after obedience, not before. The most dangerous decision is not choosing wrong. It is choosing delay. I'll think about it later. I'll deal with this someday. Now isn't the time. Those thoughts feel harmless. They are not. Because delay does not keep you neutral. It shapes direction. And direction over time becomes destiny. I was shown that these days are not about fear. They are about readiness. Not everyone will feel them the same way. Not everyone will respond. But some of you already feel it. You felt it while lying awake at night, while scrolling endlessly without satisfaction, while sensing that distraction no longer works the way it used to. If that's you, let me tell you something plainly. You are not broken. You are not losing your mind. You are not alone. You are waking up. And waking up is uncomfortable, because it requires letting go of the illusion that everything will sort itself out without your participation. It requires stillness. And stillness is rare in a world addicted to noise. So here is the question I was compelled to ask you, not as a threat, but as an invitation. What if this is your moment to listen? Not to me, not to opinions, not to fear-driven voices, but to the quiet conviction you've been avoiding. The one that doesn't shout, but doesn't leave either. You don't need to fix your entire life today. You don't need to have answers, but you do need to stop numbing the questions. Between January 9 and January 15th, pay attention to what surfaces when you slow down. What patterns repeat? What truths make you uncomfortable, but also feel familiar? What would change if you chose humility over defensiveness? And now I want to hear from you. Not later, not someday, right now. Write in the comments. What did you feel while listening to this? Did anything resonate that you weren't expecting? Are you sensing unrest or clarity? What question has been following you lately? Be honest, even if your answer is, I don't know. Sometimes admitting that is the first step. And if you felt even a small stirring, don't ignore it. That's how awareness fades. Instead, stay with it. Reflect. Pray, even if you don't know how. Sit in silence without distraction. Stillness will reveal more than endless information ever could. If this message reached you, consider this. Maybe you were meant to carry light, not loudly, not perfectly, but faithfully. And if that possibility unsettles you, good. That means something alive is moving within you. Before you leave, write one word in the comments that describes what you're feeling right now. Curious? Uncomfortable? Hopeful? Confused? Ready? Your word matters. And if you don't want to walk this awareness alone, subscribe to the channel, not for predictions, not for fear, but for clarity, for reminders, for staying awake in a world that keeps trying to lull you back to sleep. This was not meant to scare you. It was meant to wake you up. The question is no longer what will happen. The question is, what will you choose?